Namaste. So we see that yesterday we had a little background and introduction. We are following the scheme as it is given in the book, The Synthesis of Yoga. And then we see that there are these three parts: works, knowledge, and love. And then the penultimate part is about the divine perfection, integral divine perfection. So it's very interesting to see the sequence that first part is yoga of divine works, then the yoga of integral knowledge, and finally, as the crown, the yoga of divine love. And if we look at the three in a sequence, though it can start anywhere, but normally we start because work is something we are all the time engaged in. So the most natural start of yoga is through works. And in the ashram context, when people would ask the mother that we want some mantra, and mother would say, I give work and not mantras. Mantras will spring up inside. So as we continue to work for the divine, spontaneously knowledge springs up from within. So we have to understand it's a synthesis. They actually go together. Though Sri Aurobindo has, for the sake of our convenience, put it like yoga of divine works, integral knowledge, and divine love. But as we proceed on the path of works, we begin to know that what these works are, they are not an online training but an on job training. As we work for the divine, the knowledge of the divine, and an integral knowledge, because it's not just knowledge of the divine in essence, but in the details of the manifestation, it begins to spring up from within. And when we begin to know the divine and we serve the divine, then love comes as the crowning movement. So if love and bhakti has awakened in the heart, that means one has really traveled a really long distance. Normally with the emergence of the psychic being, that love in the true sense is really born in the human heart. So today we just touch upon the divine works. The principle here is yoga is a plunge within and a new birth into a new consciousness. So that's why in ancient times, when people went for the initiation of yoga, after the initiation, they were called Dvij, twice born. And in ancient ceremonies in the Western context, it used to be baptism. Baptism literally means that now you belong to Christ. So here it was like Dvij, now you have taken a new birth. So you have taken a new birth into a new consciousness. A door opens. So how do we start while we are engaged in everyday life? So the dynamics of it is this, that normally our being is tied to the surfaces through the indriyas, which are constantly, they are drawing our attention, our consciousness onto the surface things, and then through the ego self and the desire self. So these are the knots which completely tie up. The mind also ties it, but mind ties primarily through the ego sense. So this knot, as long as this knot is tied or ties us to the surface, unless we open this knot, we cannot really go within and find the divine. So the idea is that it's not about half an hour or 1 hour meditation or even 2 hours meditation. If this knot remains tight, then it's very difficult. We may sit for an hour, 2 hours, but nothing much will really happen. So yoga of divine works is the first natural entry, and we have to start opening the knot. So it's a very interesting thing. How do we open the knot? The first knot that we have to open is the renunciation of the fruits of work. So that is what is called as Nishkam Karma. So all the time we are working with something or the other in mind. We are making a program, it should be a success. I should, have a power, position, name, fame, money. All this, this is how our normal operating system is. So we have to completely renounce that aspect. So the question arises, if these desires and ambitions are not there, then why do we work at all? Well, work carries within itself its own joy. Work is also done as a joy of knowing things, but here we have to do the work as a service to the divine. So what are the works which are service of the divine? Are there some special works like religious ceremonies, rituals, or in some special place when we do some work? Is that a work for the divine, or any work can become work of the divine? Well, any work which is done in a state of inner consecration becomes a work for the divine. So once we understand this principle, then we have to dethrone. The motive must shift. The first thing that must shift is the motive and dethroning of the ego. These are the two things which are important. So when we shift the motive from the desire for results or satisfying our ambition, or we want to become rich, or for name, fame, and various other objectives. So the reward may not be always gross. Many people, they don't work for money, but the reward can be subtle. Sometimes the reward is to, be a person who is a big philanthropist. Sometimes philanthropist, you will see in ancient times, not ancient times, even now we don't have that tendency, but old time temples. You will often see that there are a lot of stones put on the temple with somebody's name. And the paradox is, I won't take the name, but name of a very rich business family. You will go to some temples, they are not known by the name of the deity. They are known by the name of the person who has donated the temple. I can speak very openly, it doesn't matter, we can take the name. Because when this man was asked, somebody proposed money for the ashram, he hesitated because he wants his name. So, you will go to different places and you will hear about Birla Mandir. You won't hear that it is Sri Rama's Mandir. So, because why? Because it is he who has made it. So, it's a Rajasic kind of engagement with the divine. It doesn't bear the full fruits of the divine consciousness. Whereas, when we just sweep the temple floors or the floors of the house with this idea that divine is going to come and sit here, then it becomes really a seva and becomes part of the divine works. Otherwise, even when we are doing sweeping the temple floors, giving money, making our, putting our names, then it doesn't go into the share of divine works. It goes into the pool of sattva, rajo, tamoguni prakriti activity within the realm of nature, and it brings its own fruits. So I may give all the money to some seemingly godlike work, but all the time with my name in the forefront. Then at the end of it, it will bring me rewards of rajogun, which is sukha and dukha, because it is the state of consciousness in which we have done it. So motive must shift completely. The second is, normally all works are done with the idea of ego is at the center point. So ego is, I am the doer. So the moment, you hear, I think the other day, this this was going on. It was a little joke. Someone was saying, he does so much work for God. So I said, yeah, leaving no room for God to work. So, because he's doing all the work, God is not required. So the first thing we have to understand is that we are not the doer. If we really look at it, it's so logical. See, divine works is one of the most logically presented thesis. So, Nishkam karma. Don't work with the idea of eye on the result. Logically, in any case, we don't control the result. So when we focus on the result, actually even our work suffers. I have known, very good cricketers, and they used to have this performance anxiety. And I would tell them, why are you doing it with this idea that you'll get a century? Not all your energy is going in that direction. Just have the joy of playing as you would do earlier. So the first thing is to remove this element of sting of desire for the fruits. And the second element is do it as a consecration and a sacrifice to the divine. Best is to do it as a worship of the divine. So what is this worship? The concept of worship, puja, is normally done in a certain ritualistic way. But in Ramayana, there is such a wonderful example of Sabri cleaning her own house. It's her house. She is supposed to keep it clean. But look at the attitude with which Sabri does it, and that's what immortalizes her. Sabri does it every day with the idea that one day her Lord Rama is going to come. And because she does it in this way, Sabri's bhakti becomes immortalized. Whereas somebody else may clean a temple floor and every day feel very proud that, morning 3 o'clock I wake up and 4 o'clock I go and clean the courtyards of, the temple. Now, that's where we have to dethrone ego. And ego is such a chalna. Literally, it has 1,000 ways of deceiving itself. Or rather, we have 1,000 ways through which we get deceived by the ego self. So constantly this knowledge, we have to remind ourselves that all that is being done as an offering to the divine. Which means at the start of the work, practically, we make an offering. Sri Aurobindo uses the word consecration, one of the most marvelous chapter. And what is the essence of consecration is that now it starts with I am doing the work for myself, but I am offering it to the divine. It ends up by I am doing the work entirely for the divine. So it means that throughout our work, there will be a kind of continuity of concentration on the eternal. There is no yoga without concentration on the eternal. So there is this state, it starts with the remembrance of the divine when we wake up in the morning, in all our activities. We have to remember and offer, remember and offer. This is the mantra. But how do I choose I'll remember and offer, but what determines what activities I'll do? So there are two stages of that. The first stage is that whatever activity comes to me, I do it without preference, to choose without preference and execute without desire. So this is the first training ground of Karma Yoga, where regardless of whatever activity, I may not like it, as the mother puts it very beautifully, that do not do anything for the sake of pleasure, but take pleasure in all you do. So this is the initial training ground. When we have gone past this training ground, then there is another kind of, swabhavaniyata karma. Then spontaneously from within there is a kind of direction, a kind of action which develops within us. That's how Sri Aurobindo uses it in the Synthesis of Yoga, that action develops within the person. So we will know it by the joy, by the inner urge, by the spontaneous inner impulsion, by the kind of inspiration we receive for the work, that this is the work which is meant for us. The divine has given this work and he will also be the doer. So what do we have to become? We have to become faithful mirrors, flawless channels for him to pour through the being, through hands, feet, mouth, eyes, everything. So this is the whole principle of divine works. Then the second aspect which is important, along with cutting the knot of the ego. Now see, knot of the ego, one of the biggest problem, the place where the ego is tied is in the head. So in the mind we have certain ideas, opinions, based on that we work. So this opinion and ideas that this is how things should happen has to really be, dismantled. This is one of the biggest. We live surrounded by, we have created a mental structure, the ego self, and we live according to that. All of us have certain principles, and these principles are very good. Sri Aurobindo says up to a certain point. But when we go into the divine works, then even these have to go. That's the dilemma of Arjuna. He has lived by certain high principles of the race. How can I kill my own people? Though I am a Kshatriya, but does it mean that I'll go to the extent of killing my own people? They are the people for whom I am supposed to earn my livelihood. So these are the dilemmas which a divine worker faces. The seeker after knowledge and the bhakta of the traditional kind may not have these dilemmas. But for divine works, these dilemmas will come because it's a question of action. So inwardly, one may live in that vast consciousness that all is the divine. But the moment there is action, there is a choice involved. All is a divine doesn't mean everything, whatever is a mixture. So divine works is one of the most natural entries, and if one can go through this rightly, then all the rest follows very easily. Sri Aurobindo in fact goes on to say that initially it looks like a road in which there are a lot of difficulties because you are actually going through life. In divine works, you have to go through life. The Kurukshetra is there. The Gyan Yogi will sit down and concentrate and say, all is Brahman. And he wakes up one day and says, I am the enlightened one. And then he says, he said, I am egoless free. And then swore because his dinner was not ready. So it's a poem of Sri Aurobindo with his characteristic sense of humor. And then he says, I asked him, are you so very sure? He said, it's not me, it's the belly god that is hungry. So, but in divine works, we can't do that. We have to choose. So that's why it's the most natural, most powerful and most engaging discovery, because it's throughout the day. Sleep, waking, small little activities, going to the washroom, coming out. Even Sri Aurobindo says, even your getting and having and receiving and eliminating even acts which are purely mechanical in nature. So the toothbrush, even eliminating things from the body, everything must be done in the state of consecration. It's amazing to actually practice it even for a day. And he goes on to the extent that when we do the works, then normally we are engaged with people, the world and everyone. There is a giving and receiving involved in the whole world. So he says very beautifully, whoever be the recipient and whoever the giver, you have to live with this one liberating knowledge that it is the divine. So when something is given to someone, it is not given to that person. This is a slight tweaking of that. Oh, I am giving to this person. And people, remember it. You remember? I gave you this. How are you finding it? Is it good? You have a dress, how long will it last? So after some time, But this is how this, everything has a term. So we have to give to the divine in the person. And regardless of the gift, it may be the smallest of gifts, it may be the biggest of gifts, that's not important. In giving, Sri Aurobindo, that story of the mother, that were half an apple of a lady who had only half an apple, and she gave to Shiva. So she said, mother says that she had only half an apple left. And this giving is a complete giving, because that was the only thing she had and she gave it. So the giving is not measured in terms of the amount. It has its value, amount has its value in real life. But the giving is measured in terms of the quality. Whether there is a totality of giving or there is 10 annas to God. Sri Aurobindo writes, in one of his letters to Mrilani Devi, that so far I have given 2 annas to God and kept 14 annas to myself. So we know, for some of us who may not be aware, 1 rupee those days was 16 annas and 4 paise. So 16 annas, he says, I have kept 14 annas with myself and 2 annas I have given to God, and I feel like a thief. Now, of course, this is Sri Aurobindo's divine humility. But everything, the whole goal of Karma Yoga is that all my actions, and similarly when something comes to us, in India there is a tradition, somebody is there in every marriage function to note down, who gave you how much? So why? Because you have to keep the envelope so that you return back 500 rupees. So हम किसी का लेके नहीं खाते. This is such an ignorance. All comes from the divine, and our only obligation in life is to serve the divine. It may sound very strange, but yoga is strange. Yoga is not the usual normal practice of life. So when we receive everything as coming from the divine, and we give everything going to the divine. Now it doesn't mean receiving everything indiscriminately. But whatever we receive it as coming from the divine. And whatever we go into the world, it again doesn't mean giving indiscriminately. That he will, in the 3 modes of nature, Sri Aurobindo describes that, and of course from the Gita. But whatever is being given to the divine presence in the person. Then one is liberated. There is a very beautiful story of Sri Ramakrishna, when somebody got a very expensive shawl and gave it to him. And he could read the thought of the person that, he is thinking, he will look nice, and the shawl is looking nice. So Sri Ramakrishna had wrapped around his, body, and suddenly he took it and threw it on the ground, trampled and started dancing. So this man says, sir, this is quite expensive. He says, see, I told you, no, you don't know how to give. So it was his way of teaching that when you have given, forget about it. It's no more yours. So when we have given to the divine anything, and it can go to any extent, Lord, take my destiny, take my being, take my character. The greatest surrender is surrender of our way of being. But instead we say, hum to nahi badlenge. Divine, you can change the whole world, but I am not going to change because it's natural to me. But yoga is not natural. It's about changing natural into supernatural. So we surrender that this is what I am. A bundle of whatever mistakes or errors, don't over exaggerate, huh? So a mixed bag. Okay, we are all a mixed bag, and you can transmute everything. So the good, the bad, everything, because even our good is still our own good. We don't know what is higher than that. Many vices, many things which we call as even tendencies which are sinful, carry within them a seed of something beautiful. And there are things which we call as good. Often they are maimed, virtues are maimed reflections, broken reflections of a much greater truth. So all of this has to be upgraded by the divine touch. So this is the ancient formula of what is that called in demonetization we had practiced, exchange. You give the old currency, you get the new currency back. So by giving, we start receiving the new consciousness. That's the new birth. We give the old consciousness, the old way, and slowly the consciousness begins to change. Then the third practice, which is very important, along with dethroning the ego, the sense that I am the doer, I am the giver, I am the one who is receiving, so and so is giving me, all this jal and janjal of ignorance has to, completely be demolished. So then the most important aspect is equanimity. So this practice Sri Aurobindo emphasizes, and in the integral yoga, again equanimity is emphasized a lot. Why? Because in Jnana Yoga we need not be practice equanimity, because Jnana Yoga is about going within and discovering the divine presence, or the illimitable, the vast, the impersonal, the universal. As far as works are concerned, we can do it in the state of Satguna and do good deeds. That's what many of of the people teach nowadays that in terms of action in the world, you do some good deeds, philanthropic deeds, or religious actions. But Sri Aurobindo takes us much further than that. And the other aspect, again, Bhakta doesn't need to have equanimity. He is in ecstasy with the divine Lord. But the moment we act upon the world, we need equanimity. Equanimity is the hub through which action will flow to the world and it will come back to us. So if we don't have an equanimity, we'll be troubled and disturbed by the slightest touch. As Sri Aurobindo says, even practically speaking in this world, leave aside yoga, equanimity is a very good principle. It gives us peace, it gives us a joy. So equanimity can mean many things. In the beginning, it's a very imperfect practice. For instance, many people think indifference is equanimity. Well, it's a step, it's not the real thing. Many times we can confuse hardness for equanimity. Hardness has nothing to do with equanimity, but it gives a semblance. At least if a person is trying to practice it, it's okay. Then philosophical attitude can look like equanimity. That, this world is, after all, what is there to weep about it? Now, this is a preparation for equanimity. Religious resignation can look like equanimity. Stoic detachment, where you face the world with a courage and endurance. All these are not equanimity, but they are necessary steps on the path. So, what is equanimity? The seat of equanimity is the soul. The soul is equal in all happenings. Not only equal, it draws the delight of the entire thing. And why is it equal? Because that beautiful poem of Sri Aurobindo, Divine Worker, those who want to really Karma Yoga in the entire essence. So, how does it end? It closes so beautifully. No power can slay my soul, it lives in thee. Thy presence is my immortality. The soul that is constantly turned towards the divine, in contact with the divine, stays in a state of equanimity because nothing else matters to it except the divine joy. As Mother puts it in very practical ways, do not try to please do not try to please others. People like it very much. Oh, wonderful. Yes, I will not please this person, that person. But next line is, do not try to please yourself. So whom should we try to please? Please the Lord. So when we do that, then slowly, that's what Shri Krishna tells to Arjuna in the Gita, Man mana bhav mad bhakta madhyaji ma namaskuru. The battlefield is there, but stay turned and tuned towards me. And when we live life like that, then equanimity becomes our nature. It's because it springs from the depth of the soul. When Mother was asked what is the sign that the soul has immersed in the play, she used one word, one sentence: a smile under all circumstances. Only the soul can give that kind of response. So, the process of Karma Yoga should lead to the uncovering and unmasking of the soul. So, how do we unmask the psychic being? Once we have cut the knot of, all the time running after the steeds of the senses, as the beautiful image we have in the Gita, the 5 horses are driving, then these steeds must be held back by the mind and buddhi. The buddhi must be awakened. And then we have the Rath, which is the body, and the Rathi. So, according to the direction of the Rathi, the soul within, the movement must take place. And that's how we have to make our choices. Because it's not an indiscriminate acceptance of anything and everything and indiscriminate giving. The whole thing should be in consultation with the soul. So, now here Sri Aurobindo speaks about how to find the soul and how really, through the path of divine works, and how really to live a life according to that. So Sri Aurobindo gives us a very beautiful, of course it's there in the Gita, and that is about the idea of sacrifice. So sacrifice is normally considered as a self-mortification. The more pain you give to yourself, if you become a martyr, and take blows on yourself, that is sacrifice. Now, martyrdom is not sacrifice. It can become a vicious and vicarious attraction for a perverse need for pain. So many people think I sacrifice like the olden bahus sacrificing to their sas, and like the modern bahus to which the sas has to sacrifice. Now, this is not sacrifice. Martyrdom is not sacrifice. Sacrifice in its original sense is yajna, it is purification, refinement. Everything must be purified and uplifted. So, for example, love. Sri Aurobindo starts these 2 chapters, Ascent Three chapters are there. The sacrifice, ascent of the sacrifice, works of love, and the works of knowledge. And so, what does it mean? It means refine. So he starts by saying that in all sacrifice, he starts by saying there has to be the element of love. Sacrifice is not something which is done very painfully. That no, we have to take a forced vaccination. That's not a sacrifice. You're not doing a good deal for the country. You're very unhappy inside. It should be an act of love. So everything that is done is an act of love. Then even the smallest of things, patram, pushpam, phalam, toyam, whatever a human being gives, that becomes sacrifice. Not going to Tirupati and taking your hairs off and then having a new hairstyle that now I don't have hair and this is the latest trending topic. So that's not what is sacrifice. Sacrifice is not even that something which I love very deeply I am going to give to the divine. It's not about giving in that sense. It's not the sense of painful self-mortification. He says everything has to be ennobled, uplifted. But only one thing which we have to expel ruthlessly. And he says it is only there that we have to be ruthless, whatever pain they may give in the passing. And he says they are the band of the spirit's enemy, whose names are Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mad, Matsar, whose names are fear and anger and lust and ambition. They have to be excised. But otherwise, the sense of sacrifice is a joyous self-enhancement. And he gives that example that sacrifice to Krishna. Krishna is not a person who wants mortification. He has to be nurtured and nourished and grown. And then he gives number of examples. For instance, one example he gives is about love. And any love, he says, any love, all love which changes into adoration has a spiritual force in it. Doesn't matter whom one loves. If there is in it a sense of adoration, a deep sense of self-giving, then it is spiritually uplifting. But because there are limitations within human interactions, human limitations, the ego, etc., come into play very sharply. That's why eventually at some stage you have to see the divine in the person and divine in all beings. That is the principle. Otherwise, all love can be uplifted. Then in that purification of love, further purification of love and works of love, he describes that initially it has to be refined of the crude elements. And then he says there is a natural tendency as the psychic being begins to emerge, it wants only that which is true and good and beautiful. Because it's getting refined, it cannot accept things which are crude and, baser elements. And then it turns into love for the God lovers. So that's why people have a natural tendency to find those who are, who have love for God. And then it becomes further universalized, and then one sees Narayana everywhere. So this is the process through which works of love tend to transmute. Then there are works of knowledge. For instance, I can take an example of medicine. So how does one practice medicine? In traditional karma yoga, it is you remember God, offer, and like the ancient dictum of the doctors, I give medicine, God cures. This is the traditional karma yoga. And if we do it faithfully, if our eye is only on being a channel of God through constant remembrance, then everything will be wonderful. Still, what is the medicine we are practicing? We are still practicing the old medicine. Whereas the divine can have new revelations of new ways of healing. So he says that doing the works of a twilight ignorance. Whereas in the true karma yoga, the integral karma yoga, the same practice we are doing, even the work, how it is to be done, even that must be guided by the divine. And indeed it can be so. There have been a few examples of, people who they have not used the word karma yoga, but this is what is meant by yoga is skill in works. Yoga karmashu kausalam. It is not just about technique and technology. The karma becomes kushal. Why? Because one is in yoga. When one is in contact with the divine perfection, everything will flow in a beautiful manner. It's not like a technique. Okay, I have to make a slideshow, let me see bullet points and everything is done, dot. Because action is done in contact with the divine, it is bound to move towards perfection. So the real thing is about doing the work well, yes, but dedication to the divine. Then again and again, he brings us to equanimity. At 3 levels, equanimity has to be practiced. At the physical level, it's about heat and cold. Is the AC too So, is the AC too cold? Is it too hot? Well, we have to just. These are elementary exercises. These are not really very difficult things. Oh, suddenly there is no light. You see, within 2 minutes, people are doing deep meditation. And suddenly in AC room, it's one thing to do meditation. And suddenly, if the AC goes off and everybody is sweating, after some time, mera meditation to ho gaya. This is not yoga. This is bhoga. Sit for meditation. Doesn't matter even if, one should be in a state like Yagnavalk. Like Ashtavakra and King Janak, that even if my city is burning, I am at the feet of my master. So, this concentration is the key to yoga. Sri Aurobindo repeatedly says, he who seeks the eternal must dedicate himself to the eternal and the eternal alone. Secret of success in yoga is this concentration. And concentration with a view on consecration, remembrance. There are aids to concentration. So remember and offer. The more we remember the divine constantly, whether it be an image, deity, Nam Jap, anything. Nam Jap has a great power in it. And to do works is a dedicated way to the divine. Then if it is hot, all right, Krishna, let's dance in the summer. Let's dance in the sunshine. And then when it is cold, then again, Krishna, take me in your lap and cuddle me. Ma, I want you to, put the blanket of your love around me. These are just many things can be done, but one has to practice equanimity to different changes in the physical environment. There are some people, who get so attached to the physical environment that they take a great pride. 50 years I have never gone out of an ashram. It doesn't matter. It may also show that you are very rigid. You can't, bear the. But yoga of divine works is through the world. One should be able to go anywhere and be in that state of equanimity. Because we build comfort zones. So, this is how equanimity at the physical level. Equanimity at the vital level. Man apman. Everybody will have his share. And be sure that if you are getting praises, there will be fair number of criticism. जिसका नाम होता है वही बदनाम होता है. It's so true. So if you are not having badnami, Shri Krishna, imagine even Shri Krishna, people didn't leave him. As Sri Aurobindo immortalizes in one of the aphorisms, they called him immoral and a corrupter of youth and their morals. Look at Socrates, Sri Aurobindo himself. People, somebody filed a court case that he has done some magic on my son so that he wants to be in the ashram. So you can imagine, of course, divine magic. But this is how people have treated the divine because they don't understand. So, how the comment was after him. Even now, how many understand? Man, apman. This is the wish that, one has to swallow. And one swallows happily. Because what is man, apman on the way to the divine? How does people opinions matter? When one is walking the path, the only opinion that matters, only, 10 times only with the underline, is the divine's opinion. And fortunately, he has no opinions. He sees the truth and sets it right. He is not there with a stick and rod judging us. Oh, thou sinner. Who will have hope if he says that? So, man apman. Similarly, when praise comes, so it is not subtle smiling and, collar I have got, I am Padma Bhushan or Vibhushan or whatever. Vibhushan and Vibhishan, this line is very thin. Huh? All this is to go away. What I am or I am not is known to the Lord. And what I want to become is to be just a child, a channel, an instrument. That's what the divine worker wants. Just to be your faithful instruments. Yours faithfully. That's all that he wants. Whether you use it, the instrument or not. Whether you break it aside when the time is over, it's your instrument. Now, it's a very big yoga that nobody else can use me. My speech, my writing, my thoughts, my feelings, nobody else has a right to use them. See how these things are used and misused in the world. Even the bodily substance itself, vital energy. So, one should be very careful that this instrument has to be dedicated to the divine. So, man apman, sometime back, I was given this offer that, you speak very well. Would you become spokesperson of a party? I said, who would want to become spokesperson of a party after being spokesperson of the Divine Mother? So, this is basically that these things will come on the path of yoga. The lures will come, the challenges will come, difficulties will come, hell will come. Both hell and heaven one has to go through equal. If hell comes, say that my Lord is here also. I want to meet him. They will say, but it is hell. Yes, yes, I know he is hiding somewhere around the corner. And if heaven comes, say that, okay, tata, bye bye, good, thank you. But bina Ram ke kaaj ke mohe kahan vishram. When Hanuman is going to Lanka, Sanjeevani Bhuti, then the mountain comes up and says, Hanuman, please take some rest. He says, it is Lanka. He's going to Lanka. And he says, I'm going for the Lord's work. I don't want to rest. Then just to please the mountain, he just puts two fingers and then jumps over. Where is he going? To hell, to the kingdom of the devil. And yet he says, that's my destination, not heaven's. So all this will come. Then the third level of equanimity is at the level of the mind. So we have man, apman, sukh, dukh, all the kinds of ideas, opinions, all this. Equanimity is the one practice that one has to keep on doing, and it keeps on getting perfected, widened, details, every little. There is no end to it actually, because where is the end to perfection in human life? So this is the way one proceeds till one discovers the soul within. It then spontaneously begins to guide us, and the master of works. Where is the master? Master is hidden within us, and we have to discover him. And that discovery comes as we get detached from all this, not detached through a ascetic detachment. Asceticism is not the way. It is tyaga, not sannyasa. So what really is tyaga? Renounce the fruits of the action. Then let the action also develop from within spontaneously as an urge. It should not be done under any kind of outer pressure or, because of various circumstances, situations, unless it is... at times, very rarely though, if you are stranded in that situation. But otherwise, action should also come from within as an inspiration and a guidance. And as we start doing this, we start becoming one with the Master. That's what we are meant for. And that is the royal road to liberation on the path of divine works. It leads us to the experience of the Supreme Sachidanand in dynamic activity. Sri Aurobindo uses the word self-dynamizing meditation. Everything becomes a prayer and a worship of the Beloved. Not just when we are sitting in the meditation room or arranging flowers. As much when we are interacting in everyday affairs of life, in cooking, in cleaning the floor, in fighting a battle. All works done by the body are prayers of the body. And that's how the whole yoga proceeds. So, I'll just read a passage and then we can have question answers. This is from the first part. And also he says, we have to renounce all the inner supports of egoism. So that means the ego seeks many kinds of, props to continue its reign. We have to abandon ourselves completely in the hands of God. To live in God and not in the ego. To move vastly founded, not in the little egoistic consciousness. What is the egoistic consciousness? I am Dr. So-and-so. You know that? So if somebody says, are you really real doctor or Jhola Chhap doctor? Does it matter? There is only one healer. But people take offense, they like to this card. So that should go. It takes time. So this should be our only identity. But to the consciousness of the all soul and the transcendent, to be perfectly equal in all happenings and to all beings, it will start like that. Then equality has two sides. One is the passive, where we are just receive the impacts of the world. Second is a dynamic equality, where we have to act. Now we can't act indiscriminately. Dynamic equanimity is where we are guided by the divine presence within and then we act. We don't lose the distinctions of what is orange and what is apple. Some people believe that, equanimity means whatever you do, it doesn't matter. There can be nothing more dangerous than that. So Sri Aurobindo uses the word dynamic equanimity, where we seek the inner guidance and act according to that, not even according to a mental principle. But till we have found the guidance, we can use a high ethical principle, but only proviso that we have to discover the true guidance within, which is in the heart. And to see and feel them as one with oneself and one with the divine. To feel in oneself and all in God. To feel God in all, oneself in all. My rival's downfall is my own disgrace. I look at my enemy and see Krishna's face. How often we get hurt because somebody has felt unhappy because of us and curses us, abuses us, hurts us. We have to have compassion. It's a practice, a real practice. That the person is struggling because of one's own nature. It's not because somebody is bad or wanted to be bad. And with that compassion, we must approach the person and pour that love and, that working of the divine. To act in God and not in the ego. And here, first, not to choose action by reference to personal needs and standards. मेरा क्या फायदा होगा? Non-starter. So the moment we start with this idea that how will I benefit, when people would ask, we want to do yoga, but tell me how is the supermind going to benefit me? And the mother would say, why do you want to get benefit? This calculating mentality. One should start because God is lovable. How does it matter? Even if everything is gone, so wonderful it is gone at the feet of God. What is the use of preserving this small little perishable stuff called myself? So this is the way one proceeds. Even if everything is gone, let it go at the feet of God. So this is the idea of yagna. Yagna is a truth of life. Everybody unconsciously does yagna. The mother for the child, the lady for the husband, and so on and so forth. Somebody for an office, in workplace. And at the end, some things come because everything ultimately goes to the divine and we receive our own share of joy and sorrow. But it is an unconscious yagna. When we do it to the divine, what will we get? People say, oh, I was doing this action, dedicating every day. I was praying to mother and, doing this action, saying it is mother. But see how much my money has gone away. I have lost, even I am going through a phase when I have no prestige. So you have to say that mother is first taking away all the poison stuff because we are too full of ourselves. So she is removing all that. And then she will pour in. Because what is it that the divine worker gets? It is not like I am doing God's work, I should get money, I should get this, that. It is a non-starter again. I am doing God's work so that I can get God or become one with Him. So what do we get when we become one with Him? Delight. That which we are seeking indirectly through all the relations and works, and that too a small fraction mixed with much poison, we get spontaneously within because we are serving the divine. So it becomes oneness with God, oneness with the divine. This idea is so powerful. That's yoga's essence is that we can become one with the divine because in our core we are that. So how do we choose? But in obedience to the dictates of the living highest truth above us. Next, as soon as we are sufficiently founded in the spiritual consciousness, not to act any longer by our separate will or movement. One can see the dissonance. One will see that there are two parts. This is acting according to the old ego self and desired self. Change it. That has to be changed. But more and more to allow action to happen. Then we have the joy, the enthusiasm, the energy, the inspiration, everything. And develop under the impulsion and guidance of a divine will that surpasses us. And last, the supreme result to be exalted into an identity in knowledge, force, consciousness, act, joy of existence with the divine Shakti. And then he says, the true essence of sacrifice is not self-immolation. We have already spoken of it, but so powerful. It is self-giving, joyous self-giving. Because whom are we giving? To the only one worth giving. We give to the world and we know what happens. World is like a, what is it called? Bottomless well. You put in, It will absorb, absorb, absorb. At the end you say, I have given you so much. क्या दिया? What have you given me? ये दिल मांगे मोर. वो वहाँ से, that abyss calls it. It shouts, you have given nothing. See, I am empty. Because that's the nature of the world. And when you give to the divine, what happens? You give a grain and he gives a bag full of transmuted gold. This is the difference. One should not give with the idea of receiving. There is no more giving but business. But spontaneously, because that's the action of the divine. He wants to give, but we have no room left for him. So even if we create a little space, he says that even if you, doesn't matter what deity, which, none of this matters. Even a little space we create and he wants to put inside and open the door and enter and occupy the whole space. This truth, Duryodhana knew paradoxically. So when Shri Krishna says that give us Pandavas only 5 gaon, he says I won't give a space even worth suikinok, needle. Why? Because he knows, give him a needle and he will occupy the whole empire. But so beautiful if the divine occupies all our life and existence. What else is life meant for? So, it is not, its object is not self-effacement. It's not that I will from today mix, sorry, but this is the only example comes naturally is Karela and Rasgulla and eat. See how much equanimity I am living. That is foolishness. Not to have any discrimination, discernment, that's not, from today I will wear only one set of one color cloth. But all the time I am seeing, that color looks very nice, that looks very nice. That's not equanimity, that's not the practice of, self-giving. That from today I'll eat only khichdi. Well, if you love khichdi, it's okay. Or senda ka khana, whatever, singhade ka puri. I've forgotten all that. But self-fulfillment. So it is not self-effacement, but self-fulfillment. Its object. The method, not self-mortification, but a greater life. So self-mortification is from today I'll have, apna pura hairstyle, everything I'll remove, all the hairs. I'll wear only Girva Vastra, take a jhola, use only a bicycle, that too very old one. And carry a tiffin box, and that's where I have surrendered myself. God cares to hoots for all these things. Go out with Arjuna on the battlefield with all the weapons, celestial weapons, and fight for him for the great consummation in the world of his will. That is equally a divine action. So this idea of sannyas, which has taken hold of human mind, self-mortification, somebody sleeping on the bed of nails is a great yogi. He's probably a great bhogi, so he needs this kind of treatment for himself. Because he is so attached to other things that only when he sleeps on bed of nails, he feels, I'm, practicing yoga. A yogin doesn't need to do that. He can live in a palace if need be, but he can live in a hut if need be. He can sleep on floor if need be, but he can sleep on a Dunlop, mattress if need be. He can walk with the kings if need be. And he can walk with a begging bowl. Kabhi कासा लिए खड़ा देखा. So this is the process. Its essence is not self-mutilation but a transformation of our natural human parts into divine members. Not self-torture but a passage from a lesser satisfaction to a greater ananda. That's what sacrifice is about. When the more refined our consciousness becomes, the more subtle it becomes, the more greater delight we get in existence. It's like a crude person has to hear that jing bang, very loud music with God knows how many volts, and unless he hears like that or plays like that, he cannot feel happy. But somebody else, just some soft little nice music going on, Sunil Das music, and there's such a joy, it's so quiet, so ethereal. It just floats in the air and you feel you are floating with it. So, there is only one thing painful in the beginning to a raw or turbid part of the surface nature. It is the indispensable discipline demanded, the denial necessary for the merging of the incomplete ego. Every time there is a push of the desire, say no. And then you see the joy, fun. What you are saying no will run after you. Because that's the law of the world. Shobinder's poem, no? Kama. They who shall renounce, I will run after. They who seek after me will lose. And then at some point, you have to get freed from both. So accept and use it for the divine purposes. So, this and many other beautiful mysteries, shortage of time, otherwise, every work can be changed into a divine work by freedom from desired self. This false soul of desire which keeps on asserting, I want it, I want it, I want my way, I want this way, I want that way. It should be, I want what the divine wants. Let it be not my way, but the divine way. That is the highway towards perfection. Similarly, renunciation of all this, too much attachment, attraction to the fruits, to the outer things. We should engage with all the things in the world, but our eye should be fixed upon the divine, whatever and wherever we may be. And finally, to act more and more under the impulsion of a growing divine consciousness within. And equanimity is a core practice, sacrifice in the sense of purification, offering, giving to the divine presence. These are the core practices of the Karma Yoga. Surrender is its crowning movement, where ultimately we reach a point of complete self abandonment to the divine. Surrender is the crowning movement of Karma Yoga, as the Gita we know speaks of it. We are completely separate from nature and we are constantly at the feet of the Lord, and nature has to go through its own process of transformation. That is the secret of the divine works. Namaste. So many things we can't speak because time is short, but it's very wonderful. But, anyways, the best way of knowing is to practice. Doing is to know it. So, let's start with just 2-3 key practices. Remember and offer Nishkam Karma and equanimity. These 3 practices of Karma Yoga, if we can take it, I'm sure all of us are doing it, but just as a kind of reminder to us, remember and offer Nishkam Karma, not to do works with an eye on the result, and equanimity. These 3 practices will take us very far into it. And remember and offer to the divine within, to the mother. Namaste.
So, Namaste, Alokda.
Namaste, namaste.
I have a question that people who are in creative fields, like maybe painting or writing poetry, when there is a craving for appreciation, and when they get that appreciation from people, all of a sudden there is a hidden vanity which comes out. So how to get rid of that?
Yes, so yeah, that's one of the practices. And as I said, it's through renunciation, Nishkam Karma. And when we look at it purely from a understanding point of view, this need for appreciation, frankly, actually, who can really appreciate? What we can appreciate at the most is something very outer. But all that has gone inside, I'll tell you a little story which is factual, and nowadays there is online thing going on. But even without online classes, I'm talking of children, there is a homework and a child gets it done through the parents. I mean, it used to happen earlier also when parents would assist. And there is another child who does it by himself. And naturally, there is a world of difference, because when an adult participates and does the thing is very different, and when a child does it by one's own effort, it's very different. Now, who gets the appreciation? So, therein we will see the answer that human appreciation is very, very faulty. It doesn't even have the acumen to appreciate. So, appreciation is okay, but if one gets an appreciation from somebody who really is deep into the inner life, or who has some vision of truth, it makes a difference. But otherwise, generally seeking for appreciation, one has to look at it that, well, where am I seeking? It's like somebody who doesn't have a taste for food, and one wants to know how tasty is the food I have cooked. And I am reminded of a story when a man got just married, and he went for a grand feast which was given by the in-laws, and this man had not much taste, hardly any taste for food. And his wife nudged him that you must appreciate something, you must appreciate something. So many 50 dishes, what to appreciate? So he ended up saying the rice is very well cooked. Now the rice was the most insignificant thing in the whole thing. It doesn't require effort. So the wife tells the man that, but rice doesn't require any effort. Says, I don't know, because this is the only thing. The man said, I found tasty, but everything else is okay. So taste, human appreciation actually has very little meaning. Once we get it to our head, and then when we do the act as a service, seva, so it is a change. It takes time. I don't deny it takes time. But that's the path of the yoga, where every time the need comes, say, there is a thought within that, oh, I have not been appreciated for my actions, where you feel not only not appreciated, let me take one step further. I have been criticized for something which I have done, which I believe in and believe it to be right. What should we do? Instead of feeling morose, instead of feeling sad and bad about it, offer it to the divine and seek his feeling in the heart. And then we will see he will communicate to us. And what he will communicate invariably, he will say, I bless your work. I bless your choice. I am with you. And that's what one should seek. With practice, it becomes very easy. But in the beginning, it has to be done. The sadness one has to offer, that feeling one has to offer, that need one has to offer, and then leave it in the divine's hands. Offering means by its nature that I leave it to the divine now. Yes.
And how to get rid of that hidden vanity which comes out?
Vanity, yes. The most, by knowing that vanity is one of the biggest dangers in life and on the path. It's like, because we are, when we grow up, we are brought up in such a way that we think these are desirable things. But that's where the teaching of yoga comes to remind us that this is not only not desirable, these are dangerous things. Because see what happens with vanity. Vanity stops our progress, or it takes us into different direction where I do things to get appreciation. Whereas humility opens the doors to progress. So, the moment we turn to the divine, we realize that the scope of progress is infinite. But the moment vanity comes, it stops us from progressing. Once we understand the nature of vanity, that, well, I will stop my own progress when I am satisfied with myself or with the praises I get. Now, do I want to stop my progress, or I want to seek further and further? So then we will get rid of it. Yes.
Thank you so much, Alokda. Have a wonderful talk.
So one thing I want to mention is that there have been some questions which I think Praveen has sent, and I'm sure there may be others. So please send the questions, and what I'm planning, I couldn't write them yesterday. I don't know, over the next 3-4 days I'll write the answers, and whatever questions are there, I promise to write the answer to all of them in a crisp and essential manner. Then it can be circulated to everyone. So we are all on email, so a common pool of questions can be there, and it'll be wonderful to just circulate. So that idea was very good, that it could be circulated, but I don't want to write it in a hurry. I mean, I can write in a hurry, but time has to be there. Some time I need to have to write, and I'll do that very happily, and then it can be just circulated. So any amount of question, any number of questions, please feel free to send. Yes.
Hello, dear friends from the distant South America, not a distance. And we have to great congratulations for your good words to us. I will send my ex to you for email. Thank you.
Gratitude. Thank you.
Alokda Shilpa here from London.
Yes.
Namaskar. I've been listening to you while I'm at the office, but absolute pleasure. I'm going to ask a very basic, almost crude, which seems to need exercise of the will, is food. Because one realizes how stupid it is quite often to give in to the palate and to give in to, sometimes if you're not doing anything, you just almost grab something to eat, especially if you're feeling stressed, or something like that. To exercise the willpower, is this again
So how to?
also just offering because we are too weak to even exercise that willpower of oneself? It's like,
Yes, yes,
I want to do
certainly.
it because I realize it's completely
Yeah, yeah.
stupid.
So it has to develop as we develop muscles. See, sometimes what happens, we make sudden want to take sudden flights and leaps. It doesn't work. Only Hanuman can leap in one leap all the way to Lanka and come back. So we have to take small steps. Say, for example, I want to master my greed for food. So if I say from tomorrow I am going to only eat this kind of food, it doesn't work. Or if it works, it'll dry the senses. So instead of doing, one says that okay, I'll eat my favorite dish, but I will not go overboard. You know, the French way of eating things, very little amount, but relish it. Then one goes on to okay, at one time I don't want to, eat all the good dishes, and one day I will keep a fast. People do all kinds of things. So it has to be done step by step to eat as much as I really feel hungry and not to satisfy my greed. So, this way, slowly, when we exercise the will, or for that matter, for anything, sitting for meditation, let me put it like that, also requires a will. That one wants to sit for meditation and one says, oh, I can't, I am helpless. No, we start with okay, every day at a particular time I'll sit for 10 minutes. Doesn't matter, we cannot meditate, doesn't matter, our thoughts are running here and there, doesn't matter. But to say that okay, every day I fix a time and I sit, and then after some time the next step, that look, now anyways I've decided to sit, so let me just try something like focusing on the breath or just calling the divine name. So it has to come step by step. And that applies to every action of the will. Now, this is one part in ordinary life, how to develop will. Like any muscle, it's like weights, we go gradually. But in divine works, something else gets added to it. And that is when we offer our will to the Lord. We are sitting for meditation, not as a technique or a process that I have to do. I offer the meditation to the divine. Say, look here, I don't know how to meditate, but I want to do meditation. Help me. I am offering my meditation to you. Now, when we do it, now slowly that little will in us gets infinitely augmented by the touch of the Divine Mother. Naturally, there will be a time, it won't be that today I prayed and it didn't work. So, because there is the sacrifice which we do and there is an acceptance of the sacrifice. So, there is a process. But a time comes when it is no more our will, but a will which becomes an instrument of the divine will. So, we have to do our effort, however little it may be, it doesn't matter. But we have to offer this work or this action of the will to the divine. And then first we see that we have much greater strength and knowledge and whatever is needed for the work, and later on the work itself is inspired by the divine will within us. So we have to offer the will to the divine. That is the way of karma yoga. But equally we can develop it with small steps and stages, because they are all part of the integral movement towards the divine. As I said with food, that okay, one has to watch that I am not eating beyond a point. So this can be a starting point. Sitting for meditation, okay, this time I will sit. Regularity and punctuality, simple exercise of the will. That I'll be regular in something which I am doing and I'll be punctual. This one exercise of the will, regularity and punctuality, can go a long way in just training our will. So it has to be trained like every other part. Mind has to be trained, feelings have to be trained. That is the discipline required for a yogic life. Even in ordinary life, it's required.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Namaste, Utpala here.
Yeah. Oh, namaste.
Namaste. Very happy to hear your talks for last 2 days. Just a thought that we try to remember Mother and Sri Aurobindo's guidance and teachings in our daily life. And when I observe, or when somebody observes, that's the the circumstances which were bothering me in the past, now they are not bothering me that much. But then when I introspect, I ask this question to myself: is it not? I hope it is not inertia or insensitivity, and it is a detachment. For example, corona cases are going on, people are dying, people have died, and I'm just giving a crude example. Exactly, it is not so, but I'm just giving the symbolic things. And then I feel that, why am I thinking that it is probably it's a God's way of reinventing a new creation. Why am I not feeling that pain, and why am I not empathetic? So then I feel that I hope it is not my inertia or insensitivity. And
Yes, yes. So I'm in the same boat, with regard to Corona and everything else. So now the thing is that obviously with yoga, which you are practicing, I am aware of it also, and from so many years, and my pranams. So, but the thing is that when we have walked the path long, the change of consciousness happens. So our in view and outlook towards life is bound to change. We will no more see things the way generally people see. Now this is one part of it. So there are things, people get over hyper, they overreact, or even they normally react. Now all this subsides because there is a deep equanimity, there is a state of quietude, which many people may think, oh, the person is not reacting the way one should react, not realizing that when we react much less, we act much better. So, this is the shift that takes place. And to an ordinary consciousness, it may look like, as you said, inertia or a numbness or, a kind of indifference, but it's not that. It is within us, within the person who is undergoing the change, that one knows that no, it is not because one is less kind or one is, indifferent, but because one is looking at things with a deeper vision. And so naturally, one is beginning to go beyond the sphere of happiness and suffering, beyond the usual good and bad dualities. And one has to accept this new change. Obviously, if we look at the world around, people won't understand. And sometimes, because we are surrounded by people, it may give us an impression that, am I doing something? Am I not able to understand things? But then, well, if we look deep within, we will realize that no, this is a change which is coming. It's not inertia or indifference, but a different consciousness which is beginning to operate within us. So it is bound to happen. Accept it as a prasad of the Lord and move on with that. Yes. Inertia will invariably lead to a state of tiredness, depression. Inertia is a package, it's a package deal. So it leads to a state of apathy.
It is not an exact word, but I feel that the test comes when something else happens, which is in our own life, or there is a real stress, which we call it.
Yeah.
When I feel stressed, and if my first reaction is it is a stressful situation, and then I can keep equanimity. That means it was equanimity.
Yes. So for a long time, the old and the new will go together. And as I was saying, there is no end to the practice. Equanimity itself. There are many areas, weak spots, which we don't know. And suddenly that part is touched. So this is how the yoga proceeds. There is a kind of initially a kind of deep equanimity. For example, let's take insults. Now, there are people who insult, and it may be one can even laugh it off. But there is somebody whom one may deeply love, one's own child. And when the child insults, now it takes a little longer. Somebody which one deeply loves, and from that person, a kind of, whatever comes, and it may be more difficult. So it takes time, it spreads into all the details of life. So that is just a question of time, and one should allow it to spread more and more in different parts. The process will be the same, to remember and offer, and one is disturbed, to offer that disturbance to the Lord, and then the equanimity begins to take over. For a long time, the two consciousnesses go together. It's a gradual, change. Thank you.
Alokta, namaste.
Namaste.
I have a query.
Yes, please.
Is it not inertia when we know that it is because of wrong medication, wrong procedure, people are dying, and it is due to the wrong strategy adopted by the government.
Okay, so that's a different domain altogether. That's like when another kind of knowledge awakens within the person.
Consciousness knows ki it's a wrong procedure, and if we are not feeling that much pain, then it's an inertia, na?
No, no, it's not inertia. I'll give you an example. For instance, whatever is going on now. So there are people who have a view about vaccination. There are other people who have a different view, and there is a very deep spiritual perspective about it. But then we are not the ones who decide the policy. So we have to understand that everything. We all have a field of action. Now, within the field of action, if we don't do what we believe to be true, then yes, there is an inertia, or there can be 100 reasons that, well, if I don't believe in allopathic medicine and I still take it because of fear or something, then it's one kind of insincerity. Or let us say that I don't believe in allopathic medicine and I don't take it. Now this is there is a clarity on this aspect. But if I don't believe in allopathic medicine and somebody else takes it, or there is the pharma companies who promote it. Now, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but that's where we don't have a say in it. So it's not inertia if we don't do anything about it. Now that's where we have to understand that's a cosmic problem, because if we go behind it, there'll be greed. There is a misunderstanding. A lot of people are doing out of goodwill, but an ignorant goodwill. So that play is too complex for us as an individual to handle. But inertia or wrong and right will be in reference to my actions. So, with a reference to my action, if I believe in something, my action should follow that. That's what is the basic principle of sincerity in any work. If I believe in something, I should act according to that. Including that if I believe in taking vaccination, I should take it because that's my real belief. But if I don't believe, I shouldn't take it. But I can't, dictate the government or others or stop others from taking or not taking. That will be unfair because each one has their right to choices. Through that, they will grow. Even the people on the government level, they have their own understanding, their own consciousness, why they are doing what they are doing. It could be 100 things. It could be ambition, it could be political gimmick, it could be a genuine feeling that this is going to help humanity. 100 things could be there. So whatever reason they are doing it, their evolution is taking place according to that. But within me, I have a right to choose and I must choose. If I don't make the right choice, then yes, there is an inertia. 100%. Yes. Yes, Sweta. So, if
So it's already time, Alaka.
yes, so we can.
I hope we can, as Alaka has already said, you can send your questions. You can email him the question, and he will be answer them definitely.
Yes, it may take me a week. I'll compile all the questions together because some may be overlapping, and then I'll send to you and individuals also, and it can be shared on the group. Okay. Yeah.
So I think we can call it a day.
Yeah. Thank you.